Let's see how to configure VLANs and how to enable trunking on the interfaces, and also how to assign VLANs to each interface. Okay. Now let's say in this topology, let's configure VLAN 10 and VLAN 20, two VLANs, and let's put R1 and R5 in VLAN 10, R2, R3 and R4 in VLAN 20. Okay, let's create VLAN 10. So other options that we have here is you can configure a name for this VLAN. Let's say this VLAN 10 is engineering department, and the other options that you have here is basically the MTU size for this VLAN completely, and then the private VLAN, so you can shut down this VLAN and all other stuff. Let's create another VLAN 20, name it as HR department, name HR. Okay, so now you can see that show VLAN brief. So we have VLANs created 10 and 20 with the names, but none of the interfaces are assigned yet. Okay, now if you see the directory for this VLANs, these VLANs are saved in a database called the VLAN database. So VLAN.dat in the directory flash. If you don't have any VLANs that it is created, okay, let's say here the show VLAN brief. So okay, I have only the default VLANs that are there. If you see in directory for that VLAN database file, that file will not be created, but this will be created once you created a VLAN. Okay, let's see VLAN 10. I'm just naming it as engineering here. Okay, now let's see the same directory here. Now you can see that VLAN.dat file is created because all the VLANs are saved here in this VLAN.dat. So now even though if you erase your configuration, basically if you right erase your configuration on the switch, if you still have this file in your directory, you will have all the VLANs, so whatever is existed before you right erase. Okay, so in order to remove all the VLANs, when you write erase all the stuff, you need to delete this VLAN.dat file from your directory, either it in flash or some kind of a boot flash, disk 1, disk 0, like that. Okay, so now so how do we send this traffic? So now let's say if I have 100 switches, so how do we create the VLANs on all those switches? So it's basically a time consuming thing, right? So that's where we use VLAN trunking protocol. Okay, so VLAN trunking protocol is basically having the server and client model, where you can configure other switches as a client, and you can configure all the VLANs in a server switch. All the client VLANs will get the VLAN information from the server switch. Okay, so now let's see what is the default status, show VTP status. Okay, this show VTP status, so this is server as of now, and the VLANs that we have here is 7. This includes the default VLAN, and the configuration revision is 2. So this configuration revision number, okay, so whatever the switch, if that is running in a server mode, if the configuration revision number is high, it will take the priority. He will become the master, and he will do whatever. He will erase all the VLANs and the lower revision switch number, and then put all the VLANs that this one is having. So basically the higher revision switch. Okay, so you need to be careful when you are introducing some of the already configured switches with VLAN.dat file. If it is having a higher revision number, then you need to make sure, okay, so your network is not completely down because of this small mistake. So I'll show you an example, okay, how exactly it will changes. Okay, now this is a server, so we have a show VLAN brief. So we have VLAN 10 and 20. We have only 10 here. We don't have any VLANs here. On switch 4 also we don't have any VLANs here. Okay, if you see show VTP status, so we don't have a domain name configured, so the domain name is empty right now. Okay, so let's configure this domain name. So this is like you are joining a domain, so all the switches that you want to be part of a single VTP domain, you need to have a same VTP domain name configured. So I'm just configuring VTP domain as SN. You can see that changing VTP domain name from null to SN. So on switch to show VTP status, so this is VTP domain name is still not there. Let's configure the same domain name. Sorry, show VTP domain SN, changing null to SN. Okay, show VTP status. So you can see this is SN. VTP domain name is configured for SN. This configuration revision is 6 and this is 1. So let's create another VLAN. Let's say VLAN 30 with the name SN. Okay, just to test this, let's exit from here. You can see that even though we configured VTP with the same domain name on switch 1 and switch 2, those VLANs are not learned on switch 2. On switch 1 we have configured VLAN 10, 20 and 30. You can see VLAN 10, 20 and 30, but we didn't learn these VLANs on switch 2. So this is the reason. Okay, you can see the VTP. Okay, VTP stands for VLAN Trunking Protocol. So do we have any trunking interface already configured? No. Show interface trunk. I don't have any interface configured for trunk. You can see here. Okay, let's configure one of the interfaces for trunk. So interface gig 1/0/24, sorry 23, switch port, so trunk encapsulation I want to give .1q, switch port mode trunk. Okay, so even though this interface is connected to a switch, by default it will be an access, it will be negotiated with an access. So basically you can see show interface gig 1/0/23 switch port. So it will show you. Okay, so this administrative mode is dynamic auto. Okay, but the operational mode is static access. So let's change the mode to trunk. So now this is changed to trunk. So you can see that the administrative mode is trunk now and the operational mode is also trunk. So once it is configured as a trunk, the other interface will also be negotiated. You can see this is negotiated with .1q and it is trunking. So now you can see we have the VLANs showing here in our trunk information. That means the other VLANs are learned here. You can see now on switch 2 we have learned VLAN 20 and 30. So now how do we restrict this on to it only switches under the administrator control? Okay, so we can have the VTP passwords configured. So VTP password, so we can configure the VTP password, the same thing on the same password on all the devices. Okay, now let's say I have a switch 1 connected to switch 3. If you see show VTP status, so the domain name is not configured. Let's configure switch 1 interface gig 1/0/20 to mode trunk, switch port mode trunk. So once you change the mode of the interface will flap. Basically it will go down and come back. Now you can see this on switch 3. Earlier we didn't configure any of the domain name. Okay, so this is where in real-time deployment you need to be very careful. So on switch 3, earlier you can see we don't have any domain name and we didn't configure the domain name also. As it is negotiated, I mean basically it is just configured the interface as a trunk. It just push all the VTP information, so basically VLAN information over the trunk. Okay, so now you can see show VLAN brief. So we have all the information of other VLANs, VLAN 10, 20 and 30. It just learns the information of the VLANs. It will not learn the VLAN assigned interfaces. Okay, so basically that is we need to configure manually. So because so we have different systems, different PCs, different printers, or different devices. I can say different devices will be connected to each and different port, but that port can be in any of the VLANs. Okay, so now let's, how do we restrict this? So we just have a switch 3 connected to switch 4. Okay, now switch 4 we didn't learn any of the stuff here. Okay, how do we restrict this learning here? So now on switch between switch 3 and switch 4 there is no trunk link. Basically there is no trunk link between switch 3 and switch 4 and switch 4 and switch 2 as well. So that's why it is not learning any of the VLANs and VTP information as well. Okay, so how do you want to restrict it? Let's say if I configure VTP password, I'm just configuring it to name Cisco. So now everything is configured with the same VTP password. So how do you verify that? Show VTP password Cisco. You can see this is now actually you can read the password here, but in VTP v3, once you enable VTP v3 you will not be able to read the password. It will be an uh, encryption encrypted password basically. Okay, now show VTP status. So I have, this one is in configured mode. Okay, sorry, this one is in VTP server mode. Now let's configure the switch 3 interface that is going towards switch 4, which is gig 0/24 to a trunk. So basically we'll enable the trunk here, switch port trunk encapsulation dot 1q, switch port mode trunk. Okay, now show interface trunk. Okay, now you can see on the interface trunk the gig 0/24 is enabled with trunk on, and trunking encapsulation is 802.1q. Now the interface come back up. Now you can see earlier, once we enable the trunking on the interface, it immediately learns the VLAN information via the VTP protocol. Now, so you have restricted this with your VTP password. So this is the clear example. Let's say if you didn't enable any of the security VTP password mechanism, so you have another used with switch. Okay, it comes with VLANs, let's say 100 and 200, 300, 400 and 500, basically with a higher revision number, and the trunks is enabled already on the interfaces that the new switch is going to connect. Okay, now once you connect, if there is any nothing security information is configured, see immediately it learns all the information over the trunk, and the switch that is having the higher revision number will take control and then spread all the VLAN information on all other lower revision number switches. Okay, so now you can see we can control this with this mechanism. Okay, now show now how do we learn the VLANs now? So we need to configure the switch in the same VTP domain name and then the password. Okay, now let's say I just want to give the other example. Okay, VLAN, I'm just creating VLAN 100, VLAN 200, VLAN 300, VLAN 400 and VLAN 500. Basically I want to increase the revision number. So configuration revision is 5, and on this configuration revision is 3. So switch 4 is having the higher configuration revision number. So let's configure the domain name and then the VTP password to Cisco. Show VLAN brief. So I have all the 5 VLANs here. So still none of the VTP messages are crossed over the trunks. Basically none of the VTP messages are sent over the trunk links yet. So let's just initiate it with creating any of the VLANs. Okay, let's create VLAN 50 on switch 1 and then exit. Now it is having VLAN configuration revision number 5. Show VTP status, show VLAN brief. So you can see earlier we have the VLANs 10, 20 and 30. Now the switch 3 is completely replaced with 100, 200 and 300. Okay, so that's where we will lose the communication completely. So basically we will have a complete downtime, because let's say if you have an interface that is assigned to VLAN 10 and now that VLAN 10 is not there at all, so that interface is isolated completely. Okay, So you need to be careful in the real-time environment when you are deploying this kind of the new switches or older switches into your network with a higher revision number. Okay. Now in VTP we have three modes. VTP basically the new mode, four modes you can say. So VTP mode. So these are the four modes: client, you can turn off the complete VTP, server, and then the transparent. Okay. So you can create um, VLANs in either in server mode or in transparent mode. In the client you will not be able to create any of the VLANs. Okay. Now let's say I just want to create VLAN 10 and 20. VLAN 20 now. So let it go across all the switches. Do show VLAN brief. I have 10 and 20. Okay. Now what I'm trying to do is I'll just change it to VTP mode client. Okay. Now the change is happened. It just went into a client mode. Now on the client mode enabled switch, we will not be able to create any of the VLANs. You can say that VTP VLAN configuration is not allowed when the device is in client mode. But it can receive the VLANs. You can see show VLAN brief. VLAN 10 and 20. Let's create VLAN 30 on switch 1. Now you can see this device is received VLAN 30. Okay. Okay. Now let's say what is transparent mode. So the transparent mode switch is the switch which is having the capability of adding and removing the VLANs. But client switch will not have the capability of adding and removing the VLANs. Now if you say if I want to delete VLAN 30, I can't delete it because this switch is in client mode. So VTP client mode. Okay. Now let's say if I want to add and remove the VLANs, but I don't want to spread this VLAN information to the other switches, or I don't want to receive any VLAN information on my own device, but I want to send the other VLAN information from one device to another device. Okay. So now let's change switch 1 and switch 3. Sorry, switch 3 to transparent mode. Okay, VTP mode transparent. Even um, even on the switch 2 as well. Okay, so now we have changed the mode to transparent. So now what is the expectation? Now if we create a VLAN on switch 1, it needs to be created on switch 4 but not on switch 3 and switch 2, because now switch 3 and switch 2 are in VLAN transparent mode. Whatever the VLAN that we created, it will send over the trunk, and switch 2 will seize it, and it will not install that VLAN. It will just pass on to the other trunk link, as in the same case as in switch 3. So switch 1 will send the information, the new VLAN created information to switch 3. Switch 3 will just pass on this information to switch 4. So switch 3 will not install that. Okay. Now before changing it, let's see show VTP status. So show VTP status, the operating mode is transparent. You can see this, the configuration revision number is 0. The transparent mode will always change the revision number to 0, and it always be in 0 itself. So it is always so it is recommended, it is better to configure the VTP mode in transparent and then introduce it to the network so that it will not give any of the issues in your network. Okay, now this is 0, so now let's say show VLAN brief. We have VLANs 10, 20 and 30. Okay, so we don't have VLAN 50, so let's create VLAN 50 on let's check the information again on switch 3 as well. Show VTP status, this is transparent and the revision is 0. Now VLAN 50 here as well. So now VLAN 50 here as well. So let's create VLAN 50. Exit. So VLAN 50 is not learned on switch 2. So VLAN 50 is not learned on switch 3. But VLAN 50 is learned on switch 4. Okay. So now uh, let's assign VLANs to the interfaces. Okay. On switch 1, so as we decided earlier, R1 and R5 are in VLAN 10, R2, R3, R4 are in VLAN 20. So let's go to interface gig 1/0/1, switch port mode access, and then switch port access VLAN 10. Okay, so now R1 is in VLAN 10, R2 this is in VLAN 20. Okay, so I just want to show you, because we segregated this uh, into two different VLANs, 1/0/1 and 1/0/3. So if you see here, I have a R2 that is configured at 10.1.1.2, which is in the same subnet as R1. This interface is shut down. So let's take the spanning tree once that it's in forwarded state now. So even though both devices are in same subnet, they'll not be able to communicate each other, because if you see the MAC address table, so they'll be learning on a different VLANs. Show MAC address table. If you see, router 2 is learned on VLAN 20 and router 1 is learned on VLAN 10. Sorry, router 2 is learned on VLAN 20 and router 1 is learned on VLAN 10. Okay, so that is the reason. So even though they are in the same subnet, they'll not be able to communicate with each other. But if we just change the VLAN information, just want to change it to VLAN 10 now. So it will take some time because the spanning tree convergence again happens. Needs to learn the MAC address on that interface. Basically the ARP, all this stuff will take some time. Still this is in learning mode. So now it is in forwarding mode. Now we will be able to in that, you can see that. So now let's change it to VLAN 20 and switch to gig 1/0/2. So how do we verify that the interfaces are assigned to each VLAN? So you can verify in two ways. Show VLAN brief. You can see that these two are assigned in VLAN 10, these two interfaces, but this one I ideally wanted to VLAN 20. So show VLAN brief, you can see gig 1/0/1 is in VLAN 10, 1/0/3 is in VLAN 20 here. Okay, and you can also check show interface and then switch port. Okay, now you can see that this is configured for static access, and then the operational mode is static access, and then the access mode VLAN is VLAN 10. Okay, same thing on 3. So you can see the difference, VLAN 20. Okay, on switch 3, so I purposefully ignored the command switch port mode access. If you see that interface switch status, basically switch port status, okay, you can see that this is dynamic auto and the operational mode is down. This down is because the interface is shut down on R4. Let's enable that first. Interface gig 0/2, no shut. You see earlier I just want to compare the administrative mode. So administrative mode is static access here, and here it is dynamic auto. And then the operational mode is static access because it's not seeing any of the trunk encapsulation packets coming from the other interface, neighboring interface. That's why it's just operating on the access mode itself. So now if you see these VLANs are in different these VLANs are assigned to different interfaces, and then all the routers are in now in different VLANs. So R1 and R5 in VLAN 10, R2, R3, R4 are in VLAN 20. Okay, show IP interface brief 10.1.1.1, 10.1.1.2. So So 10.1.1.3. This is not configured yet. So 10.1.1.5. Okay, so now all these four routers which are configured for IP addresses are in the same subnet. Okay, now because of the VLAN segregation, and then each router interface is configured, basically assigned to a different VLAN, they'll not be able to communicate with each other. Okay, now if you see from R5, I'll be able to reach 10.1.1.3, which is router 3 in the same VLAN um, configured on the other device. So now what is the problem? Okay, so still we are not able to ping 10.1.1.3, which is on also on router also on VLAN 20. So do show VLAN brief. Okay, this is configured for VLAN 20. And on the switch 4 we have a router 5. So VLAN 5 is basically we in router 5 is basically in VLAN 10, so that's why we are not able to ping it. So let's ping 1. We should be able to ping. Yes, so this is what we can basically segregate the interfaces. Even though they are in the same subnet, we can just try to manipulate the traffic. So this is where you need to be very careful. So basically the recommended design is, so for each VLAN choose a different subnet, not in the same subnet. Okay, so this will resolve so many problems. Okay, now let's say on the trunk links. Okay, in the trunk links we can allow whatever the VLANs that we want. Okay, now show interface trunk, sorry, not on the, basically on the switch, show interface trunk. So I have the trunk link which is configured on gig 1/0/20 and gig 1/0/23. Okay, two switches are two interfaces are configured for trunk. Okay, and now let's say if I don't want to allow VLAN 10 over this. So switch port, interface range gig 1/0/20 and then gig 1/0/23, switch port trunk allowed VLAN. So I just want to allow only VLAN 20. That's it. I'm not allowing any other VLAN. So now only VLAN 20. Now what will happen? So this will obviously fail because on none of my trunk links I'm allowing VLAN 10. So basically R1 is connected to switch 1, which is in VLAN 10. R2 is connected in VLAN 20. So R2 will have a communication to R3, because on the trunk link that is connected between switch 1 and switch 2 and switch 1 and switch 3 we are allowing VLAN 20 only. Okay, so this is where you can manipulate using the trunk links, whatever the VLANs that you want to do, all this stuff. So you have another command. Let's say if you want to add some more VLANs to that. Okay, so this command is quite powerful, so you need to be used with little care. Let's say if I want to allow only VLAN 10 now. So let's say now I want to allow VLAN 10. So earlier we were allowing VLAN 20, now I want to allow VLAN 10. Okay, basically it just allows only VLAN 10. So if you want to add anything to this allowed list, what you need to do is VLAN add. Okay, so VLAN add, and then so you just add VLAN 20 now, so it will add that. Once the spanning tree is in forwarding state, it will allow VLAN 20 as well there. So you can see that now it is allowing for VLAN 10 and 20.